This is a short story that I wrote back in August of last year, 2025. It's titled Intrusive Thoughts. Most of the time, she was good at suppressing them. The one time she gave in to them, it was a mistake, one that would follow her for life. But now that mistake was behind her, one that she had overcome and moved on from. With enough practice, she could ignore those dark parts of her psyche, the parts laden with ire and fury. In this corporate jungle, in some respects her natural habitat, she knew better than to let her impulses get the better of her. That she could take this side of her, that boiling rage, and channel it into a productive work ethic, she believed, spoke volumes on her effectiveness as a leader. So she listened, calm, stern, distilling that passionate venom into soft little nods of courteous cordiality, hearing every word that her junior colleague spoke with droning dullness. On and on she went, saying things that Flora had no interest nor mood to listen to. So, in spite of robust efforts in relation to our diversification and corporate outreach initiative, Lisa went on, fiduciary constraints as a result of our third quarter earnings have limited some of our more optimistic outlooks, revealing several shortcomings to our stated goals, namely in the four quadrant marketing analyses, results which, as you can see here by the graph here on this slide, also on page 23 of your booklets. As you can see, despite initial expectations of an upward trajectory, our returns have receded into a trench area, but things have stabilized or stagnated here at 79 points for the three consecutive quarters, give or take 3%, a potentiality which we accounted for. Lisa's voice stammered a little, vaguely shaken, as she felt Flora's eyes staring quiet little daggers into her. So far, our multi pronged venture to scale up the enterprise has been met with some unforeseen externalities, and this sort of resistance has introduced some delay in hitting our targets we set out in our initial project proposal. Much of this can be attributed to frailties in the global market, which, as of yet, are unmitigated, producing a rippling effect which could be perceived as trending towards the negative, and, well, because of that, it is necessary that we reconsider our approach with more synergistic trading strategies. However, we can certainly expect to swim back into our previously set goals for the upcoming cycle, provided that things line up, and we are certainly optimistic in that regard, expecting substantial return on investment and record setting profit margins generated for all of our shareholders. Uh-huh, Flora snarled, her lips slightly parted to reveal how dangerously close she was, teetering to the edge, her teeth gnashing, holding back a quiver of anger. A whisper escaped, ready to unload the most expletive and vile of vitriol. As she listened to Lisa giving her little spiel in her dumpy clothes, she no doubt felt the potent urge to scream something profane and obscene at her. You stupid fucking... But she kept her composure. She upheld her demeanor as a working, respectable professional, and in an almost condescending, patronizing fashion, she merely smiled. It was a loaded smile, and it brought Lisa to a shudder. She then examined the plastic laminated report sitting in front of her, sifting through its pages, pressing her fingertips up against the troubling graphs and disappointing pie charts. So what it sounds like to me is we're hemorrhaging our finances. That accurate to say? Flora said, a quiet severity in her tone, allowing the frankness of the assessment to sit with ample gravitas in the room, producing a lingering silence so suffocating that it filled the air of that conference room like an unbearable fog. Everyone there, from the freshly hired MBAs to the stone-faced old boys club of trustees, sat tense, discomfort palpable across their countenances, as the tense interplay progressed. How do you propose we resolve this? Flora went on. Oh, well, Lisa began. I'm sure you're aware of this, yes, being such a bright person, yes, but failing to meet on our earnings target is not something we can just move along with. Our shareholders don't exactly find comfort in that, even if it's the state of the world or the economy that we're talking about, which is rough, certainly, but I don't know. I've been in this game a while, and in my mind, it's always been a bit volatile, hasn't it? Lisa nodded. There are always things within our power to resolve that, don't you agree? Of course. Well, Flora raised her hand as a teacher to a child with learning challenges. I'm sure you have some clever ideas up in that noggin of yours to combat this. Yes, Lisa said, trying to keep her cool. We are implementing some robust changes into our marketing and sales strategies, which, with significant cost reduction and downsizing of certain more superfluous departments, no need to divulge the finer details. Whatever you plan on doing, I don't need to know. The results will speak for themselves, won't they? I trust you and your team will come up with the proper decisions to steer this ship in the right direction. It's miracles like that which we can always so reliably depend upon you for, isn't that right? Well, thank you for your presentation, Liza. You may sit. Lisa, she corrected. My apologies. Sit. Flora resented being corrected. Lunchtime margaritas, courtesy of her C-suite benefits, made for the perfect remedy to a stressful work week. Such casual frivolity was typical of her Friday ritual. Even when she was at her wits' end, she could never say no to a boozy afternoon with her closest friend. My God, what an idiot, Flora moaned between bites of her sandwich. The artisanal, overpriced kind with tomatoes, toothpick, and feta cheese, between two slices of locally sourced, freshly baked French bread. So I looked at her like, okay, so we're losing money. Are you going to do something about it, or are you just going to make this my problem? Why don't you use that goddamn Sarah Lawrence degree of yours and do the job we're paying you 6 figures and some change with ultra generous benefits for? Wow, you showed her, huh? Ingrid grinned, scooping from her plate of gnocchi and truffles. For 2 whole hours each week, she would vent her frustrations, all her grievances, letting out all her accumulated workplace gossip, replete with her trademark snark and snide remarks. Though she was not the easiest person to orbit around, Ingrid remained a constant presence in Flora's life, attentive and loyal to the very end. Whenever Flora arrived, bearing gifts of juicy office chatter, Ingrid could not resist clinging to every syllable that passed through her regal lips. Ingrid was that rare type of companion, the kind that had stuck with her since their middle school days into their own adulthood successes in the corporate world. They had never gone more than a few days without seeing each other, and even then they still texted back and forth constantly throughout the day. Flora huffed. I mean, really, sometimes you just have to remind them who's in charge, you know? I don't like to, but that's how it goes. Oh, totally, Ingrid said, with a middle-aged crease of enthusiasm on her face. I swear, I wanted to grab her by the head and just... With her hands, Flora made a thrashing, swinging motion, which she paired with a violent, almost bestial grunt. She stopped herself mid-expression, remembering she was in a public place, full of spectators. People regarded her, discreetly but noticeably. So she pulled a smile and dropped her hands on her lap like a fine little lady. An uneasy aura emerged, and their eyes briefly met before looking elsewhere, some sense of shame arising in the process. They both went quiet, a moment of wordlessness, taking sips of their bottomless drinks as they thought of other things. Obviously I didn't, but briefly trailing off, smiling. She irked me. Oh, I'm sure. It must have taken a lot not to... Flora went bottoms up with her drink, finishing it in a gulp so concentrated that it went down her throat with the weight of an anvil. Ah, she said, the drink's ABV properties giving her life. My therapist says I should loosen up a bit. She said loosen up? Not in so many words, but, just take it easy seemed to be the gist of it. Breathing exercises, perhaps. Want to do some hot yoga this week? I'll have to get back to you on that. Need to check my schedule. That's fair. What's new with you anyhow? Flora asked. It was a rare occurrence in which she had shifted the topic towards something other than herself. For the next quarter of an hour, she pretended to have any interest in whatever uneventful life updates that Ingrid had to share. And when it was over, they left their plates, still half full of food, leaving behind a meager sum for the server's tip. The morning headline read, Treasure Hunter Uncovers Buried Remains in Public Park. Her screen brightness high, directly above the stocks app and some calorie counting stats. She read it back, repeatedly, scanning it, again and again, her blood temperature plummeting, trying to process, hoping and praying that what she was reading was nothing but a hoax or perhaps even just a very bad dream. Those words, published by a publication of massive circulation, were enough for her to realize her life, as she knew it, was forever changed. All those comforts, all those luxuries, the kitchen island, the marble countertop, and all the fancy knives, pots, and appliances. All of it stood on a feeble thread of uncertainty. She could not wrap her mind around such precarity, and all because of that article. The paragraphs that followed did little to quell her sorrow. Metal detector. A shocking discovery. Wrapped in plastic. Blood-stained sheets. Skeletal remains. Dental records. Through tears. Family confirmed. Reported missing. 23 years. Found at last. A brutal aftermath. Why did she torture herself this way, scrolling her phone at that instant? She was in such a stable, upbeat mood up to that point, but now misery and regret were all she could feel. She just wanted to find a quick and easy smoothie recipe. She didn't even want to read the news. Oh, I can't stand reading all that. Reminds me how cruel the world is, was her typical excuse for not staying up to date. Her wellness routine was spoiled. Her blood pressure skyrocketed, and her smartwatch made it explicitly known to her. There was a nervous tremor rushing through her body, and she needed to pull a chair and take a seat, lest she were to faint on the newly installed marble floor. She missed how blissfully unaware she was just a moment earlier. Only one course of action felt clear in her head. Call Ingrid. Immediately. She rang her up, again and again, blowing up Ingrid's phone with notification after notification, multiple missed calls, all gone to voicemail. After the dozenth try, she thought about actually leaving a voice message, yelling at her to answer the goddamn phone. But her watch reminded her to inhale and exhale. Breathing exercises. Half an hour passed, and the initial shock had worn off. Though she was still in a frazzled state, she had enough clarity to realize that repeatedly calling her accomplice was not the wisest course of action. Her emotions simmered, a burning hot sweat quelling on her steaming face and pits. So woozy, she drank a shot of bottled ginger that had been sitting there on the counter by her keys. She felt like screaming, and so to release the tension, she briefly let out a chilling, ghoulish moan, which startled her dog, Ricky, into getting up from his frumpy bed to calm her with his sniffs and licks. Of the many thoughts that were swarming her, the one that rang the loudest was, fucking dork with a metal detector. Who was this loveless, lifeless treasure hunter, and why couldn't he have a normal pastime like skiing or getting hyper-fixated on model trains? What good was he going to do with all the pennies and thimbles he was attempting to collect? Stupid hobby. Flora sat in a frightful meditation, a craven solitude, imagining how dorky this man must have looked when he made the grisly discovery. What was this bored, now traumatized individual wearing when he dug up the body? He must have looked so ridiculous in his wide brim hat, with his cheap drugstore sunglasses and his grandmotherly fanny pack, worn tightly around his rotund, hot-pocket stuffed belly. She had never laid eyes on this man, and already the mental picture of him was bringing out the mean girl in her. There was no uncertainty that a part of her youth, a part of her that she thought she'd matured from, was coming back in full swing and full of vinegar. Despite her best efforts at self-care and holistic health, that side of her had never truly gone away. No matter how much she would deny it, it was always true. She had affirmed that dark part of herself, 23 years ago. They were close in 7th grade. It began the day that Flora came into the drama club meet where Ingrid was an active and enthusiastic member. It was an unusual place for a girl of Flora's status to be in. She was not in the habit of fraternizing with the theater geeks. Her only reason for being there was to gain the attention of Ricardo, a good-looking new exchange student from Venezuela. Oh, he was so well-groomed and so well-dressed. A dreamy crush of hers straight from the pages of a romance paperback fantasy. This mission was immediately aborted when she realized just how flamboyantly queer he was, belting a tune from Jesus Christ Superstar with a trembling falsetto. Lacking any interest in theater otherwise, and having already cultivated a reputation for nastiness, nobody in the club trusted Flora or even attempted to befriend her. Nobody except Ingrid, her glasses, braids, and knit sweaters making her look so meek and helpless. Even then, Ingrid marveled at every word from Flora's mouth. In Ingrid's mind, Flora exuded a level of cool-headed, cool girl confidence that she could only aspire to. She especially appreciated Flora's sarcastic remarks, her passive-aggressive put-downs of all the performers and all their lame attempts at Monty Python-esque shenanigans. No one could have imagined that of the many so-called friends that Flora had, it would be Ingrid who stuck out with her the longest after all these years. Flora, the pretty and admired offspring of a successful physician, and Ingrid, the twitchy-faced, mumbling, doddering daughter of a failing wine merchant. For what it was worth, Flora gained a lot from being friends with Ingrid, as she could copy all of her homework assignments from her. Conversely, Ingrid benefited from being around Flora, as their association did gradually raise her social capital during all those cliquey school years. It took a while, but eventually she was accepted into the rest of Flora's friend group. By junior year of high school, after undergoing a serious makeover regimen, she was fully acclimated into Flora's gang. Ingrid always so doting, Ingrid always so loyal, with an intense and unyielding eagerness to gain her approval. Of everyone in Flora's circle, she was undoubtedly the one who was true and authentic in her allegiance to her. It was senior year, during a particular sleepover, that their lives would take an irreversible turn. On this evening, while sharing a plate of Uh-Oh Oreos, some tallboy cans, while listening to Gwen Stefani on Ingrid's compact laptop, Flora was venting, as was her habit, about someone in their circle. She thinks she can just get away with dissing me like that? Flora scoffed in her cherry red pajama pants and her All-American Rejects hoodie. Really needs a reality check if you ask me. Someone needs to teach that girl some fucking manners. For real, though, absolutely. Plus, that top looks better on me anyway, don't you think? I mean, it's not even a question. I'm so much hotter than her. I concur. You concur? Ew, Ingrid, have you been watching Masterpiece Theater again? I told you that's not cool girl shit. My bad. And I mean, all that's to say that her attitude is atrocious. Just, her phone vibrated. Oh God, she scoffed. Quasimodo's texting me again. Ingrid shook her head. Don't let me get off topic, yo. My point is, she gets on my goddamn nerves. Yeah, I never liked Sylvie. She's always been jealous of you. I don't even care about that. She's just yaps all day long, and just because guys put up with it, she thinks that all the rest of us have to, too. It's like, no, sweetie, it doesn't work like that. She grabbed an Oreo and chewed on it, still talking with food in her mouth. She needs to get her shit rocked. Yes, Ingrid said. Do you concur? Flora asked, rolling her eyes. Ingrid chortled. Then a thought occurred. One of those intrusive ones. And for whatever reason, Flora just could not suppress it. This is kind of fucked up, but seeming almost disturbed by how undisturbed she was. You can take a joke, right? Of course I can. Duh, why do you even have to ask? Don't you think that, wouldn't it be so funny if, oh my God, if someone did that to her? Did what? That, Flora said, pointing at the TV, a horror film playing on one of the cable stations. A helpless young girl with an overly acted scream was being stabbed by a slasher. Ingrid looked at the screen, laughed so hard. She was in stitches. Hilarious, yeah. Right, so why don't we give that a try, huh? Flora said, staring Ingrid dead on without blinking. The fact that she let herself speak it out loud was another of those mysteries to her, though perhaps it was because Ingrid was so calm and accepting, so eager to please, that she was perhaps the only person in Flora's world who could receive such an idea and not immediately recoil in disgust. Ingrid shuddered. Is this still a joke? You think it should stay that way? I mean, isn't that, like, bad and stuff? Bad? Yeah, and stuff? Flora made an ugly expression. So? And? I thought you were cool. I am, Ingrid protested. It's just that Ingrid did not immediately shut it down with something that she would have to contend with the rest of her life. Could be, I don't know, could be, so what did you have in mind? She shrugged, opening up another can of beer before consuming it with haste. How would you do it? Not me. Us. And they were off to the races. In a matter of hours, 2 past midnight to be exact, they were driving drunk to Sylvie's house, speeding and swerving through the sleepy streets of their affluent neighborhood. Through giggles and chirps, they sneaked up to the window of her bedroom door. There in the back, where a neighborhood dog next door, behind the fence, was the sole wordless witness to this unfolding crime. Sylvie awoke, startled and groggy-eyed. Flora and Ingrid were quick to grab her, dragging her out of there, duct tape on her lips to muffle her shouts, twine tied tightly around her wrists and feet, cutting her circulation before shutting her out into the woods and playing out the finality of their deed with her big brother's baseball bat, which they snatched up from the patio of her house. Flora and Ingrid took turns enacting their depravity. Flora was, of course, most enthusiastic about the exercise, out of all her vicious instincts. Surprisingly, Ingrid was able to get into it as well. She was not so gentle and peaceful as her timid demeanor seemed to suggest. Sylvie's agonizing gurgles lulled her into a morbid silence. They spent the entire rest of the night disposing of her. When the local news reported the missing teenage girl, Sylvie Stevenson, age 17, college bound, no one cried harder on camera than Flora did. "Sylvie," she said through a reddened face and cheeks wet with tears, "we really miss you and we're so worried for you, but if you please just come back home, please. We're ready to support you and welcome you back. So please come back. Please stay safe, please." Her brief stint in drama club was not without its fruits. During that time, Flora would often visit Sylvie's house, expressing to her family how badly she felt for them, how she wished she understood what they were going through. She assured them that their daughter would return home soon and that she was probably just somewhere out there trying to discover herself, as teenage girls are wont to do. When it came to consoling Arnold, her brother, she had decided to take her depravity even further. She went into an intense romantic relationship with him, a tumultuous relationship which lasted several years and even led to 2 years of marriage. That was a calamity, all unto itself. But even after the divorce, after the headlines, the world moved on. The incident became just a sad old instance of unresolved strife. Within months of the disappearance, the stations had all moved on to some other violent crime or tragedy. There was never a shortage of tearjerkers to fill the air between commercial breaks. Flora and Ingrid spent the ensuing 2 decades coming to grips with what they had done. They felt a coldness about it. The anxiety of something getting caught, of the truth coming out. Neither of them ever spoke about it. Not concretely. Not directly. It was a skeleton they both wished to ignore and keep tucked away in their respective closets. Whenever they went out together, they were sure to pretend it never happened. Yet sometimes even during casual chatter it would slip out from one or the other. "Did you see the ring Jason got me for my birthday?" Ingrid held up her ring finger. "Wow, it's lovely," Flora said, lying. "It's okay, you don't have to lie. It's pre-owned. He got it from an estate sale. I found the voucher for it." What a cheap shit. A knowing nod between the two. "We really should have taken the ring off of her." It was dumb, but she was just so... I know. The sight of her mangled hand, ring still attached, would forever haunt their memories. As her world started to unravel, one thing was for certain. She could not come to work. She would have to come up with some excuse not to come in. She called in and told them she was going to take some PTO, a decision she arrived at with some hesitation, since she was trying to save up those days for her much-needed sunny getaway trip to Tel Aviv. But alas, this was more important. Days passed, and still not a word from Ingrid. The time she needed her the most, and she wasn't picking up at all. Was she in custody already? If so, what had she spilled? Oh, Flora's imagination was running wild with all kinds of worst possible scenarios. For several days she would not leave the house, not even to pick up her mail. She would sit for hours by the window, staring at every neighbor that passed, every car that went by, scrutinizing daily and hourly. After a significant period of time, she did begin to come out for brief intervals, and it was during these that she could feel eyes glaring at her, watching her every move, judging her, waiting to pounce. Maybe they suspected already, and were just waiting for her to make one false move that would conclusively prove it was her all along. Was this the truth? Or was it all in her head? Her therapist did tell her, after all, she needed to loosen up. Not in so many words. But it was true. She did tend to focus on the negative side of things. Sometimes a little perspective shift was all she needed to get back into a healthy headspace. After a while, she stopped checking the news for any developments on the case. In a sense, she felt it did not matter much anymore. For the first time, she decided to forego all the Grubhub and Instacart orders. She was hungry, and she felt that she had the right to go out and get groceries herself. So she drove out, making way to Whole Foods. From the hot bar, she bought a huge tub of mac and cheese, mixed with quinoa and a bit of salad. She paid for her food with a scan of her palm. If this was a fatal error on her move, she did not care much. Flora enjoyed the convenience of the technology far too much. Privacy be damned. She sat in the shade of the cramped parking lot, surrounded by Cybertrucks and minivans, wolfing down that mac and quinoa combination like it was the most heavenly ambrosia she had ever feasted upon. Within minutes, she had finished her meal. It was though, knowing her easily life was fast crashing into an untimely but well predicted demise, that now everything she saw, from the crawl of a tiny spider on a dashboard to the sheen of the paint on the cars surrounding her, was now endowed with an exquisite level of beauty she had long taken for granted, a beauty in the mundane that she had so long neglected to notice. She stared at the empty cardboard tray, its little blotches of grease and residue like clouds in the sky. Then she looked up across her windshield and saw a dog, staring at her from across the lot, through the tinted window of a Camry. What did the dog know? She shrugged, realizing it was an insane train of thought. She dumped her trash out into the concrete for some low-wage employee to come in and pick up, as was their job. She drove down to the gas station. While waiting for the tank to fuel up, she listened in meditation to the murmur of traffic hitting her from both sides of her head. Out of nowhere, a short-statured Guatemalan man waved at her for attention. "Excuse me, ma'am. You have any coin? Soy muy hungry. Very, very hungry." Flora regarded the man, in his disheveled clothes and his sad, ovular face. In ordinary circumstances, she would never have paid any attention to such a desperate and pleading soul. But on this occasion, she took a certain feeling of pity towards him. She thought about Ricardo, how he might have looked like this disheveled, dirty man if he hadn't come from a wealthy, important family of oil barons. She smiled softly at the Guatemalan, her hand trembling a little as she put the pump back into its slot. With a desperate force, she put the key in the ignition and drove off. But in an instant, the man was crying out to her, "Stop! Stop!" Flora could see him running towards her rearview mirror. Her blood went cold, and she hit the brakes. This is it, she thought. He's undercover. He's come to get me. It's over. Now it's time for them to take me away. The man rushed to the driver's seat, panting. She rolled down her window and looked down at her steering wheel, feeling guilty, feeling ashamed. "Yes, officer." "¿Qué?" he replied. "Are you going to take me now?" "Senora, you left your tank open." She craned her neck and looked back. She had indeed left the cap untucked, dangling there at the side of her car. "Oh," she said, a soft chuckle of relief. "I close it for you." And he walked to the tank and twisted it back on before shutting the little door over it. "Thank you," she said, relieved. Then an urge came over her. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her wallet, from which she promptly handed him something. "For your troubles. Thank you." And so she drove off. The expression on his face was one of intense confusion. Why had she left him, a complete stranger, her credit card? He went inside the gas station, grabbed a bag of chips, some soda, and some candy, and to his delight, found that the card worked perfectly. She drove to the beach, where she sometimes liked to have quiet sessions to think and meditate on life. She watched the beachgoers, delighting in their quiet little joys, basking in the sun. How oblivious they were to the hell she was enduring. Perhaps they were going through private hells of their own. She took a long nap, and by the time she awoke it was nighttime again. Flora turned on the radio to an oldie station, and the first song she heard was Swing Swing by the All-American Rejects. It gave her pause, to realize a song she used to adore when it was charting was now considered old people music. She could think of only one other person who would find this amusing. She gave Ingrid another call. Still no answer, but this time there would be a voice message left. "Ingrid, you're not going to believe what's considered an oldie now. Listen to this." Flora held the phone up to the speaker and let it play for the entirety of the song's runtime. She thought about apologizing, but decided against it. She felt there was nothing to be sorry for. When the song was over, she hung up. She looked out at the pulsing ocean, drifting back and forth, the graceful waves hypnotizing in their own sweet way. She sat there a little more until she started to feel sorry for everything she'd done. There was a regret there. Not for herself, but for the world around her. Wherever she was going, there was certain to be a major falling out to come with it. In particular, she felt bad for her neighborhood, knowing they would no longer have a fearless crusader like her as the head of the homeowners association. She could already picture all of the ugly little garden gnomes and yellowed lawns that would be infesting the neighborhood in the wake of her absence. Oh, how dreadful it was all to be.